Aloha. Thought I'd create a video here that's weaving together some of the contemplations that have just been running for me these days, and also to embody a holistic contemplation of the 20th gene key, which is the solar cycle within which I'm sharing this information. And the 20th gene key is the journey from the shadow of superficiality, surfaceness, and to the Siddhi, the miracle frequency of presence. And when presence comes in and elevates the shadow of superficiality, what blossoms is self-assurance. Self-assurance. To be self-assured. So I'm gonna allow this gene key to be a sort of spine for what I call a holistic contemplation. And you may have already noticed that as I'm talking, I'm moving my body. I'm allowing my body to be moved. I'm not thinking about what my body is doing. I'm just allowing and giving permission for my spine to be involved in this conversation, and for my breath to be involved in this conversation. And I would invite you to consider the most favorable conditions for engaging with this transmission. And we don't always get to or choose to invoke the most favorable conditions or to experience the most favorable conditions. But to the extent that it's possible, I want to invite you to consider going outside, taking your shoes off, and planting your feet in the earth, planting your feet in the soil of the earth somewhere. Ideally somewhere where you can make whatever sounds you want to make. And move in whatever way you want to move, so that you're not concerned with what other people are thinking about you, because that's profoundly distracting in every possible sense. And one of the great hallmarks of superficiality, which disrupts our deep inner self-assurance. So externally, having those favorable conditions will amplify something about this transmission, will create even more favorable conditions for something precious to land in your body, in your nervous system, and in your soul, to be connected to a place, to be feet in the earth, to be communing in that way. Also favorable conditions are generosity in aloha. Generosity with your own breath. To be in a continuous remembering, noticing, and deepening of your experience of your breath throughout this process. Noticing where your breath catches. Noticing where, your breath sinks deep, where it touches your spine as it goes in. So, coming into the presence of the breath together here. I'm not going to belabor this today, because I really do want to share this contemplation, and I'm hoping those who might already be tickled by the shadow of impatience can remain present and curious about what's about to happen. Because I'm quite certain that there's something you'll experience if you continue down the pathway of this contemplation with me that you have never experienced before. Whether that's some kind of something coming together inside of your paradigm, noticing something you hadn't noticed before about your own movement, body, emotions, paradigm, stories, habits, or the connection between those beautiful dimensions of your being, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the soul, the relationships, all one holistic field within this holistic transmission, which if I were just sitting here talking or even writing something, it would not by my standards be a holistic transmission, because it doesn't include as many of the layers as it could. So, favorable conditions for this contemplation of the shadow of superficiality, the gift of self-assurance, and the siddhi of presence are space to move, permission to feel and breathe deeply into whatever's showing up for you. Permission for your body to move, to shake, to make sounds. I'll do the intellectualizing part over here. The more you can let your animal body just make the sounds it makes as you're connecting, we are connecting with this shadow, with this gift, with this miracle frequency. We'll connect with each of these throughout the course of this brief, or perhaps not so brief, given my record, contemplation. And within the space of my contemplation, I cultivate a culture of presence in nature. I cultivate a presence with the divine source, light. I cultivate presence with the Na'aumakua, as they're called in Hawaii, the archangels, the spirit guides, the allies from the beyond, the ones who are here in service of love and awakening. And I cultivate presence with my ancestors, the ancestors of the past, whom I carry forward, and the ancestors of the future, who I call forth into this moment to guide and support us to create the most beautiful future for them. I presence my ohana, who is you, the one who is watching, playing along. All of the incarnate beings around me, the one family of this beautiful earth and beyond. And I cultivate a culture of presence with my deepest, innermost, ancient, and innocent being. And the physical form that this being is incarnated into is learning how to operate and elevate and integrate with the most ancient and the most infinite possibilities here and now. Yeah. So this is a little background. This is just a little enculturation, because I don't want this to be an intellectual exercise for anyone. This intellectual masturbation stuff that pulls us out of our body, pulls us into our head, gives us a sense of accomplishment because we had a thought. Guilty as charged, mister. That's me. I'm only talking about myself here. And that's the thing about this contemplation, is it's a very personal contemplation about my journey with this. That, I believe, will have relevance to anybody who listens, because we're all human. And all of us, no matter how enlightened we may appear to be to ourselves and others, we all struggle somewhere in our lives with this shadow. If you weren't struggling with the shadow of superficiality, you would be absolutely present all of the time. Presence would just saturate your whole existence. Yeah, got a little lung thing that is self-inflicted. So we all struggle with the shadow of superficiality. What do we mean? What do I mean? I don't know what we mean, but I know what I mean when I'm talking about that. And my meaning is deeply informed by my engagement with the gene keys and my absolute devotion to language over the last 30 years of my life, to understanding deeply what it is that we're doing when we construct words and language, and how to align our language with our intention, with my intention, so that I can create with my words that which I intend, and that my intention can be pure, can be virtuous, can be clear, and can be divine and inspired by love. So, aloha. Aloha. The last preparatory thing I'll say here is that the undercurrent, the chant that is rolling underneath this whole contemplation, the chant that is rolling underneath everything in existence, that we can join, are invited to join as often as we remember, that I join as often as I remember. I hear it. Sometimes I hear it right when I wake up in the morning, and I join it right when I wake up. It's the in-breath. Oh, and the out-breath. Oh. Oh. And that in-breath is a receiving. It's a receiving. And what is the elevated response to receiving? The elevated response to receiving is gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for this breath. Oh, thank you. I receive. I receive. Oh. But that's only half the mantra, isn't it? Because I receive and I give. Receive with gratitude. And I give with aloha. 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 With love. I give with love. Thank you. I love you. Whatever my attention falls upon. Thank you. I love you. I look at the shadow. I breathe it in even deeper. I love you, and I bring my love to what I find. I breathe the shadow in. I receive it even more deeply. I don't deflect it, and I don't project it. I don't hide from it. I breathe it in, the shadow of superficiality. Thank you. I love you. I know that if it's here for a very sacred purpose. because there's nothing here that doesn't belong here. Everything that's here belongs here right now. Everything that's here belongs here right now. Everything is right where it belongs. This is an axiom. Your mind doesn't know better than life where things belong. Eh? It would be rather superficial of you to believe that your little neocortex, stamped as it has been with some very corrupt programs throughout your education and upbringing, and filtered as it is through all of the wounds and trauma that you have personally and ancestrally experienced, that little word maker up there knows better than life itself where things belong and what should be going on around here, right? That would be the ultimate superficiality. So we're going to dispense with that illusion here today, to the extent that we're capable, and say that if the shadow is here, and it is, then it belongs here, and it does. And so my only invitation, my work here today, in this context, is to become more intimate with the shadow, to understand it, to accept it, to feel it, to embrace it, to breathe it even more deeply into my heart, into my body, into my bones, so that I can identify where it's operating inside of me. It's identifying where it's physically manifesting in my body, identifying where this shadow is emotionally manifesting in my heart, my astral body, where it's mentally manifesting in my stories and the things that I talk to myself about throughout the day, the things that I have given my belief to, the things I don't question, where the shadow of superficiality exists in my most intimate relationship with myself. Where have I not plumbed my own depths? And also, of course, where the shadow of superficiality is interfering in my most intimate relationships and in my least intimate relationships, all of my relationships, as a field, a network, a nexus, a mycelium of life energy that I am embedded within. How is the shadow of superficiality staying at the surface, interfering with the level of deep love that is possible, that I know is possible for me? And when we allow ourselves permission to contemplate at this level, rather than being in denial, I'm not superficial, I'm really deep. Look, I have a resume of all this philosophy and spiritual studies, and I've done Vipassana 17 times, and if there were no trace of this shadow left in you, you would be present in a way that nobody who met you could deny. And I have not met such a person ever in my wanderings. So, where's the shadow of superficiality? Let's just breathe into the body, come into the field of sensation together for a moment with an awareness of this. An openness to seeing the superficial nature of things. Gently, with gratitude and love. Superficiality doesn't ask questions. Superficiality is living at the surface of life, taking things at face value, we perceive superficially, and we also generate superficies. We generate superficialities. We feed and collaborate with superficiality in our lives. We do that in ways that are usually unconscious. Some people are more aware of some of the ways that they are still feeding superficiality in their lives. Oh. And superficiality is bound to make you unwell. Superficiality cannot, to the extent that you follow the guidance of superficiality in your life, in our lives, to the extent that we follow the coding, the DNA coding of superficiality, the pattern of superficiality, we will diminish our thriving. To the extent that we follow superficiality and collaborate with superficiality as it presents itself in our impulses and in our enculturation and habit patterns, and it does. To the extent that we're not aware of it and we follow that patterning, we will replicate patterns of degeneration. We replicate patterns of degeneration through superficiality. Superficiality, as I referred to earlier, can be seen as wanting to put on some sort of identity for the world. I am this kind of person. And then having to perform that identity in the world in order to feel safe. Identifying with a small fraction of the whole of ourselves. Being afraid to trigger other people to have judgments about ourselves, and therefore to perform a superficial enculturation that is actually not entirely authentic, and it's not healthy for our body, heart, mind, and relationships. Superficiality is when you have like a strong reaction to what somebody just did or said, and you mask it. You show them an artifice, an edifice of some kind of what you think they need to see, instead of showing them what just happened for you, truly, honestly, emotionally, physically, and cognitively. That is the shadow of superficiality at work in our relationships, and we all do it to some extent. It's a hiding behind a facade. Facades. Superficiality is being more interested in how your body looks than how it feels. Superficiality is being more interested in accumulating external wealth than accumulating internal virtue. Superficiality is going to amass money instead of mana. Mana. Chi, prana. Life force energy. Superficiality will sacrifice the inner life force energy to grasp at an external source, a superficial source of security. And if we look toward the gift, if self-assurance is the gift, then superficiality is like other assurance, right? It's being assured by not being judged too harshly. Seeking the assurance of your own path and what you should do and how you should live according to some form of external reward or the lack of an external punishment, which is the same game in reverse. Superficiality always has us seeking a future good at the expense of our now. And I want to make some bold claims here for you to sit with and feel. But if you are someone who is enjoying greater financial wealth than you need to actually care for your most basic and beautiful and important needs, if you have way more than you need materially, but you're physically and or emotionally and or mentally not thriving, then your priorities are fucked up. Then the shadow of superficiality is replicating in your life writ large. That's all of us. Because the whole wealth game, the whole accumulating and sequestering more and more of our collective resources for my personal use, for a rainy day, that comes from a deep lack of self-assurance. That comes from, it is a superficial strategy for getting what we all really truly want, actually. The only thing that will really satisfy our souls. And that's love. That's love. That's intimacy and connection and a sense of belonging and love. A sense of belonging that's not based on how much stuff I give people, but that's based on how much presence I give people. It's based on the sharing of presence, aloha, the sharing of the breath, the presence of the breath. That's literally what aloha means, presence of the breath, or the sharing of the breath. Oh, what is most important? Again, wealth and objects and belongings and status and public sort of celebrity, all of that is superficial. It's out there. To get beyond superficiality, we have to go deeper. And the deepest is our very deepest core center. It's right here in the na'au, in the danqian, in the belly. It's right here. How's your belly? How's your gut? How are your shits? It tells you more about how you're thriving than any external. How are you sleeping? If you don't sleep well at night, your priorities are fucked up. It's okay. My priorities are fucked up. Not in that way. I sleep like a baby at night, most nights. But my priorities are fucked up. Our priorities are fucked up. Have you noticed? Have we noticed the world that we've constructed that is so grotesquely inequitable, unjust, and violent, grotesquely, from the perspective of a deeply peaceful, harmonious, and loving nervous system, from the perspective of love, which never takes any more than it needs and always gives what it has to give for our collective good. And here I want to just note that we are speaking of the 20th gene key, which is paired with the 34th gene key as its programming partner in the matrix. And the 34, which happens to be my SQ, my soul quotient in my hologenetic profile, is the shadow of force, the siddhi of majesty, and the path of strength. The shadow of force here is instructive when we're thinking about superficiality. Because if we are to be superficial is to attempt to force an outcome. Because I don't know what would happen if I were just me. That is a fucking mystery, a terrifying mystery to reveal my deepest vulnerability, and innermost truth. I was trained that this identity that I'm showing the world will get me by. So I'm attempting to force my relationships and force things by embodying a superficial dimension of my life. Force is a survival instinct. It's been hooked into instinctual survival stuff. The belonging in the group, to not be rejected by the group. To not be rejected. So we create a superficiality, a superficial identity structure that we perform. That is riddled with passive tension. And poor posture, and is very civilized. It's colonized, imperialized, generation after generation of colonization stamping itself into until it's achieved a level of homogeneous education that can allow for millions of people to be trapped in the same limiting thought structures that are actually false, creating this superficial appearance of a certain kind of world that people exist in their minds through the force of the education system and media, bread and circus, to keep things at the superficial. It is the way of the brutality of the past as it's hidden itself in the fabric of our current master-slave dynamic. Superficiality. So just breathing with everything that's getting stirred up here, in through the nose. Out through the mouth. Sinking our stance a little bit, getting down in our stance. If you're sitting, just letting a little wiggle move through your spine. Let your jaw relax Lengthen through the crown of the head and sink down through the tailbone, and just breathe in with what's here. And let the sound of your voice express the texture of this inner experience. Feel the shadow in you, in your relationships, and in your world, and just let it in. Let this, don't look away, just for now. We bring it up. We get honest with ourselves. We stop being superficial with ourselves. We peel back the curtain and we look at the way I am replicating this shadow in my most intimate sphere of life within my own being. And that's the place, that's the fulcrum point for global transformation. When I put my attention on this inner fulcrum of where I'm doing it, where I'm tempted to do it, where I have historically done it, and the consequences of historically doing it, and I let myself feel that. And all of the training and programming and violent training. I was violently trained to be superficial by my culture. Violently trained not to look too deep into things for fear of becoming crazy, cuckoo, get put away and drugged for life if you look too deep into things and have an awakening that's too disruptive for other people's superficiality. That's the war on magic that's still being waged more insidiously than ever. They don't burn witches at the stake anymore. They put them in mental hospitals and drug them. Meanwhile, a society that is so grotesquely unjust, stratified, whose priorities are so broken, judges those who feel deeply enough to feel overwhelmed and outraged by the fact of it as maladjusted. Yeah. Well, I have had the great good fortune of not ever being put away like that. I might have flirted with it a couple times. My life's work, the shadow of my life's work is psychosis. So it's kind of part of the program of sanctity, to sanctify, to find the most sacred depths within anything that our attention falls upon, to sanctify it, to bless it from deep, deep within ourselves and that which we are encountering, which are the same one. So we start to move into the gift frequency. We call upon presence. When we bring our presence to the shadow, then the shadow can blossom open into something more beautiful, more fit for human consumption, for human thriving, not consumption. We're not consumers, we're creators. We're not parasites. We are the very nervous system and intelligence of Gaia herself, going through a very difficult phase of our development. So what does it mean to be self-assured? What does it mean to anchor our sense of cellular certainty within? I know at a cellular level. I don't know at a mental level. I think at a mental level. But when my mental level and my cellular level are in agreement with my heart, then this is where holistic thriving happens. When my physicality and my emotionality and my cognitive capacity are all aligned, that is holistic thriving. That's when we get all the systems working together. Under those conditions, I'm operating in a way that will be of service to my relationships and to society in an actual, substantive, and regenerative way. But to the extent that I continue to collaborate with the societal systems that have been built by these shadows, by fear at the very core. Let's be clear, fear is the force at the core of all of this shadow stuff. There's just 64 names of fear in the Gene Keys transmission. And in this world of duality, love and fear are such a simple litmus. When you are being guided by fear, you are moving in the shadow and collaborating with the shadow. When you are being guided by love, which meets fear with love and presence, then you are in the gift and even maybe in the siddhi. You'll know when you're in the siddhi. It's not ambiguous. And we've all tasted them. We've all tasted the miracle frequencies. Today we're invoking the presence that we may contemplate what self-assurance feels like. Just imagine walking in the world, pre-approving your own experience, and therefore pre-approving everybody else's experience. Walking in the world really clear about what you're a yes to and what you're a no to. Left or right, self-assured. Oh, I don't know, what would so-and-so think of me if I went left? Self-assurance. Listen to your na'au. Listen to your belly. Self-assurance comes from the center of the being. Programming partner here is the gift of strength. Strength does not come from waving your limbs out here. Strength comes from deep within, from the core, from the center. Movement that comes from the center out is strong. Move that happens out at the superficial level, out here at the periphery, is weak. Try just pushing your hand down. Now bring your hand here and let somebody try to push it down. The closer you bring that hand to your center, the harder it's going to be for somebody to push it down. That's strength that comes from a core. True strength. I don't need my body to superficially look big. I want to have true strength, which is self-assured, which is deeply rooted in my own worthiness, my own divine nature and intelligence. It's deeply physically rooted in my body's wellness. My knees are bent when I'm self-assured. My knees are here. I sink down because when I'm down here, I'm self-assured. I can feel and meet anything. When I'm up here, my feet together, my legs locked, and my butthole tight, my shoulders up and kind of collapsed around. This is not self-assurance, but this is where so many people live. Some version of this. I walk around and people are living there, all around me. So trapped inside of a physicality. The Kanaka Maoli, the Hawaiian people, have a beautiful saying. One of my favorite olis, Aloha Oli Oli, this song that is an acronym for aloha, for what is aloha. And for the H in aloha, they say ha'a ko kulana. Ha'a ko kulana. Which is translated as, in humility, I am always self-assured. In humility, I am always self-assured. In humility, I am always self-assured. Ha means low, low. And it's not just a philosophical notion, because the Olelo, the language of the Kanaka Maoli, is an organic indigenous language which refers to actual physical objects and things everywhere. It's a much less abstracted language than any of the ones that most of us speak. And so, my Kumu says, get low. Get low to prepare for your prayer, for your hula. We don't do hula from up here. We do hula from here. We start always here, And that is where I live now. I bring myself lower, because when I lower myself, I'm more self-assured. I'm more stable in my base, in my core. It's a physical thing. All martial arts point the same way. All true arts of embodied truth point the same way. But being low doesn't mean that I lie to you about what I'm good at. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm simply standing in a way that is more favorable to my well-being and my ability to meet life with a sense of dynamic responsiveness and strength. Relaxed strength. I'm not rigid. I'm relaxed, flowing, ready. So in getting low, I'm self-assured. But self-assurance doesn't have to lie to you about what I'm good at or try to appear good at what I'm not. Superficiality is going to try to look good at things. Superficiality is going to put on some kind of a display, and intentionally to display a certain signal, to send that signal. Self-assurance just keeps radiating what it is authentically, actually. In my own life, my self-assurance has me moving in a way that nobody else moves. I'll be in a conversation with somebody and just be doing this. Yeah, wow, yeah. I'll be doing this. Whatever my body wants to do. When I notice my body is feeling a little stagnant and my spine is needing to be revivified to restore the really high level of pleasure that I experience in my body on a daily basis from my sense of self-assuredness. To restore the depth of breath that is my birthright, and that is, by my own empirical data, I'm usually the one breathing the deepest in any space. Not because I'm trying to, but because it is my way. It is what I choose for myself. It is my chosen aloha, self-love. I love myself first and foremost, because I am assured to know that no project out there is worth sacrificing my health. No. I reject that notion. And I will be rejected by society's standards for rejecting that notion. This is the risk of self-assurance, to know in your core what your principles are, what you stand for, what you're committed to, and to walk that commitment, even in the face of judgment and superficialities which want to perceive you in the light of the shadow. This is what a courageous life must encounter and be willing to risk. Self-assurance risks people disagreeing. Self-assurance does not violate anyone else's consent. Let's be very clear about that, because self-assurance is the very ground and foundation of one's own deep inner commitment to sovereignty. deep inner commitment to honoring one's own consent first and foremost, and not trying to purchase anybody else's fuzzy boundaries by embodying fuzzy boundaries and giving things you don't want to give. And no. Self-assurance knows the power of no. No. Just try on a no. Feel no in your body. Move your body. Put hands up. No. No. Feel your no. You guys are okay. Sorry, babies. My dogs are right here. Feel your no. Feel that no. That boundary. That really clear Because if you don't have a no, you cannot know where your yes really is. Impossible. So the self-assured is willing to say no, even though they know that it will have social consequences. That it might stir up somebody else's codependency, might stir up somebody else's sense of victimization for not getting what they are demanding. It might even cost you a job, an income source. It might cost you your whole reputation, saying no. It might even get you into a physical scuffle to say no to something that you're a no to. But here's the deal, fam. If I say yes to something I'm a no to, then I just violated what is sacred. That's not ponno. We cannot be ponno with each other when you are saying yes when you mean no. And you don't get to make your yes my fault, ever, if you want to be self-assured. If you choose to be a sovereign being, you must take responsibility for every time you did that and withdraw the power that you gave out to the external, to the superficial source, back into yourself and feel the shame. Feel it. Feel the disgust with yourself that you did that. We've all done that. We're all continuing to do that at hopefully subtler and subtler levels in our lives. But every time we do, it's a degenerative pattern that will only lead to more suffering. But every time we say no, when we mean no, every time we set that boundary and stand in our inner truth, which is, I'm not willing to spend time with people who are unkind. I'm no longer willing to give my attention, which is my most fundamental resource, to people who are cruel or who are superficial. I'm no longer willing to bend over backwards helping people who are not interested in supporting me when I am actually needing the support. I'm no longer interested in trying to be liked by people who judge me. Oh, that's self-assurance. Because until you know who you are, you can't possibly find your people. You can't possibly find your person. There's somebody in this universe that you were designed to pair with. Multiple somebodies, perhaps, but at least one somebody for the vast majority of us that we were designed to pair most exquisitely with. But if I'm trying to perform somebody else, how am I ever going to be the actual electromagnetic attractor for that person? Self-assurance. As a leader, I am self-assured. As a politician, I am superficial. Politics is superficiality at the at the governmental level. Politicians just try and convince you that they're on your side so that you can give them the power to actually exploit you. All of our politicians are participating in massive systems of human exploitation. Massive systems of human exploitation. Of inequity. Profit-driven power consolidation. And it's all superficial power. All that power that can be accumulated through fear, through manipulation, through lies, through violence and force, all the external wealth that can be accumulated through that, it's actually dead weight on a soul. Dead weight on a soul. All that superficial wealth is actually sickness in plain view for everyone to see. Because there's no tree in the forest that's healthy that takes more than its own share of what's provided. There's no ecosystem that's healthy that sequesters resources for the private use of any species within it. It's a distribution model, fam. Thriving is a distribution model. Imagine if your heart kept a little bit of blood from every pump just for a rainy day and kept storing it up. We know what happens when our fat cells do that. Yeah, wealth is just material obesity. People think that they're well because they have more stuff, but they actually prevent themselves from the deepest possible wellness through the continued hoarding and accumulation of more than their fair share of what is here for all of us, of our collective resources. Self-assuredness knows that I can walk into a forest and survive. Even if I don't have a knife. Having a knife would be very favorable. But even without a knife, I can probably make it work. Self-assurance. Oh. And the behaviors that come out of the gift of self-assurance assure themselves. Allied with the gift of strength, self-assurance is gentle and patient. Self-assurance doesn't force things. It's not throwing itself at things, trying to move things that aren't ready to move. Self-assurance is just looking for the path of ease. Easy is right. True strength, no force. True strength is just being at the right place at the right time and getting your instrument into the fulcrum, into the deepest fulcrum of the fulcrum of the fulcrum of the fulcrum, to be able to, with the lightest touch, create a whole, feed a whole cycle of regenerative impact. Self-assurance, when we move from self-assurance, which is patient and gentle, moving with strength, then we are creating a regenerative impact wherever we go. And this happens mostly at the simplest level, at the smallest level in our lives. But 10,000 tiny regenerative, self-assured decisions is a tidal wave of change in a person's life in comparison to where most people are living in relation to this shadow of superficiality and this fear of the group this fear of judgment, fear of being ostracized and rejected. This fear of what would happen if we no longer allowed fear to guide our actions and instead allowed love and joy. Can you imagine how embarrassed you would be if you were just ecstatically happy everywhere you went? You were just like, ah. Like, imagine just being happy, like truly happy to be where you are and just discovering life freshly in every single moment. And it doesn't mean that you're a fool or that you forgot how to drive a car or how to operate a credit card or something. It just means that wherever you are, you've got mad serotonin pumping naturally because you are self-assured, you're present, you're here in this miracle of this moment. Can you imagine how absolutely terrifying that would be for your ego? It's much more safe to look mad in public, look sour, gas face, or to look neutral, or to look down on people, or even to look broken and sad. It is far more vulnerable for most of us to be fucking happy, to be joyous, to fucking remember our original innocence and to meet life from that place of innocence. Oh, third city, innocence. But it's from there that we innovate, that we create new patterns through our self-assurance. And the funny thing is that we seem to be identity constructed around an individual ego as the essential self. Fam, the truth is that our essential self is just as much a collective being as it is an individual being. Our essential self is just as much collective as individual. We're just much more identified with our individuality. But when we are self-assured, when the more I become self-assured, the more I connect with others who are also self-assured or seeking that self-assurance and they can taste it in me and want more. And so together we become better students of self-assurance. And when we become self-assured, when the great body of humanity becomes self-assured, we will no longer listen to the superficial threats of a civilization that has been constructed to exploit most of its inhabitants on behalf of a very few. Because that's the truth of where we at. This whole civilization has continuously evolved itself ahead of the growing discontent of the many to keep this whole situation intact, where there's a bunch of people starving and struggling and pushing to make sure that very few people have grotesquely more than they'll ever need and generationally keep securing their ability to get even more of the pie. That's where we at. So let's be present with that layer of what is self. We are doing that out of our shadow of superficiality. We are doing that. And where I can do the deepest work and the most powerful and lasting work on behalf of the collective is right here first. In cultivating this self-assurance and being honest with myself, where the shadow of superficiality is seeking my attention. But as we become self-assured, our presence becomes more radiant. Our presence becomes more grounded and peaceful. our presence becomes more harmonious with the elements of life, with the Tao. And through that harmony, we conduct more manna through our bodies. Our words carry more electricity. Our impulses and thoughts become clearer. Our yeses and nos become much clearer at a gut level, and we become much more trustworthy at following our deepest inner guidance when it is rooted in love. And God will never violate your sovereign right to deny love in favor of something that feels safer to your ego. God will never deny you the right to reject love. God will not save you from yourself. Puppy Town. So, with that, just invoking presence, invoking the city of presence, which is allied with the city of majesty. Gentle, self-assured presence. Not going anywhere. Not pushing any agendas. Listening and responding. Intending and surrendering. Osha. Osha, no bark. How do you cultivate presence in your life? Aloha. The presence of the breath. Because always the breath is there underneath it all. And the deeper and more gentle the breath, the more presence is here. So, where we began, we return to the presence of the breath, to this infinitely unsung chorus. Thank you. I love you. Receiving this here now. Fully. And radiating love to this here now. This here now. This here now. This is the presence. Presence of love. May we all cultivate this presence in our lives and practice this presence until it's no longer an effort in any way. Until we're emptied out of all of our superficiality, emptied out of all of our fear and our need to force life into our agenda and design. Osha! And we relax. Like water. We rest at the low point and flow down. And then evaporate and rise and flow down again. evaporate and rain down. Just like that. Yeah. Just like that. Yeah. Hi, baby. We're present here with what shows up. We give that our presence, and then it just goes. We don't need to force anything to go away. We don't have to pull anything in. We just get to be present with what is here and to appreciate it deeply, to give our love to what is in front of us, and to set boundaries around that which we choose not to give our energy and attention to make space for more of what we do. But if it's here, presence. If it's not here, no need presence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to call that complete for today. I wish you great love. Aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. Thank you.